I have some more opinions that I want to discuss regarding Amanda Nunes versus Irene Aldana at UFC 289. I want to talk about Amanda Nunes' retirement. I want to talk about what could be next for the women's bantamweight division. And I also want to spend some time at the start of this video straight away talking about Irene Aldana's performance and why it angered me so much. Because I'm not even over-exaggerating here. Irene Aldana basically did nothing, and it seemed as though she was more focused on making sure that she didn't get finished than she was in making sure that she even won against Amanda Nunes. Like, really put this into perspective. Irene Aldana wasn't really highly ranked as a women's bantamweight contender to be getting this title shot. Remember, this was supposed to be Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 3. They gave it to Irene Aldana. Irene Aldana is ranked where in the bantamweight division? She's ranked number 5 in the bantamweight division. And let's be honest, wouldn't have been getting the title shot if not for Juliana Pena getting injured in that fight. And she got given a golden opportunity in the main event of a pay-per-view in front of Canada for the first time in however many years they've been back to Canada. It's a massive crowd. The energy is crazy. She's got a title shot that she really didn't deserve. Golden opportunity. And she goes out there and literally just tries not to get finished rather than trying to win. I know when we look back in history, in recent history especially, to fighters that haven't had good title fight performances, we can come up with better examples for like the worst title fight performance that we've seen over the past 10 years. We can bring up Eddie Alvarez against Conor McGregor. We can bring up Paulo Costa against Israel Adesanya. Normally when you think about the worst title fight performances of all time, you think about who was on the opposite end of whoever had the best title fight performance of all time. You know, you look at like Conor McGregor and then you say, okay, so by default, Eddie Alvarez became the worst title fight performance if McGregor had the best. Surely it means that, but it really doesn't. When you think about it, Irene Aldana had a worse performance against Amanda Nunes than Paulo Costa did against Israel Adesanya, and Eddie Alvarez did against Conor McGregor, and even like Aldo did against McGregor. And I'm being serious here because the reason those people got finished in their title fights, which some people see as more dominant of a win than a decision win. The reason why Paulo Costa got finished by Israel Adesanya is because he tried to win, and therefore he got finished. If Paulo Costa really wanted to make sure he didn't get finished and just accepted leg kicks at range for 5 rounds and woke up the next day with a completely dead leg, but as long as he didn't get finished, everything would be okay, then I'm sure Paulo Costa could have done that. If Eddie Alvarez wanted to just really play it safe against Conor McGregor and maybe last an extra round or 2, I'm sure he could have done that. But the reason why both of them got finished is because they both went for it towards the end. They realized they were outgunned. They realized they weren't having a good night at the office. But Paulo Costa still went in for an exchange and tried to land on Adesanya, which is why he got caught. You saw the same with Alvarez. At the end of the fight, he's been picked apart. He's been dropped multiple times. He's been shown up in front of the UFC 205 crowd. Crazy. It's just like he was being shown up so badly, but still at the end of the fight, the reason why Conor McGregor got that finish is because Eddie Alvarez went for that final shot just to see if he could land something good on Conor McGregor to change the way the fight was looking, and McGregor finished him. Irene Aldana did something way worse than both of them. She literally didn't even try to win that fight, and it's crazy to even say that. Maybe she was injured. Maybe I'm about to go too hard on her here, but it needs to be mentioned. That was absolutely pathetic. And I know people can talk about the amazingness of Amanda Nunes, and oh my God, how amazing was Amanda Nunes? The fact is, Irene Aldana landed 8 strikes in round 1, 11 in round 2. These were stand-up rounds, by the way. 8 in round 3, 13 in round 4, and 1 strike in round 5. Now, as the fight went on, she spent some time on bottom, and she got taken down now and again, and not too many times did she get taken down. It was a 25-minute fight, and she got controlled on bottom for 7 minutes of that 25 minutes. So there was a ton of opportunity for her to try and land some shots, and she did when she tried to. When Irene Aldana tried to throw shots, I know she didn't have a great accuracy rate in that fight, but she had moments where she would land something. You know what I mean? Like in the early rounds, she landed that counter right hook. And I was watching the fight after that first round, and I was like, okay, so is Irene Aldana just sort of biding time here? Is she trying to survive against Amanda Nunes here? Like, what is she doing? Is she getting past the early rounds and then, oh, watch out, round 3, 4, and 5, if Nunes starts getting tired, we're going to see Irene Aldana go after her and pour it on. I was waiting for that moment. Maybe it was a strategy I was thinking, but it never came. It was just Irene Aldana with her hands literally glued to her forehead, giving up takedowns because of her hands being glued to her forehead and not being able to get underhooks quick enough to stuff those takedowns, but also not even throwing anything, man. It was such a disappointing performance. And I know people are saying, oh, wow, people were really picking Aldana before that fight. Aldana had a decent chance. If Juliana Pena can beat you ever, Irene Aldana's got a decent chance to maybe land something on Amanda Nunes on the feet. And she showed that she could land some shots. It wasn't a bad underdog pick to go with Irene Aldana, but no one could have expected such a terrible title fight performance. Genuinely such a terrible title fight performance. It seemed like she wasn't even trying. And I know people are going to say, how can you know that? You don't know how much a calf kick hurts. She got calf kicked like twice. You don't know the pain she was in. The fact that she went 5 rounds is heroic. I can hear Reddit already. You know what I mean? The point is, all these other women's MMA fighters are getting calf kicked. All these other women's MMA fighters are getting hit. And you see some of them go for it, and they go to war. Zhang Weili, Ioanni, and Jacek won. Same thing. There's a difference between them. And that's what I'm calling out. I'm calling out the difference between other title contenders that actually wanted to get the win, compared to Irene Aldana, who, again, stood there like a heavy bag in front of Amanda Nunes. And I know people are calling Amanda Nunes the GOAT of women's MMA. She is the GOAT of women's MMA. GOAT of the sport, you can't say that. You just can't, judging on the quality of opponents. Because look at what Irene Aldana just did. That's not a win that you can get over someone that just calls you the GOAT of the sport. And we look at previous opponents of Amanda Nunes as well, like Megan Anderson in her fight with Amanda Nunes literally pooed herself in the cage. Just defecated her underwear in the cage and just let Amanda Nunes beat her up because she was just paralyzed in fear. It's crazy to me. Because when I was watching Amanda Nunes win the fight against Irene Aldana, I was seeing her throw combinations and go for exchanges. And whenever she went for like a prolonged exchange and threw a bunch of shots in succession and went forward and threw 3 shots in a row, you could see so many openings. Her hands would come back down to her waist. Her chin was wide up in the air. But still, Irene Aldana did nothing. Crazy to me, that performance from Irene Aldana. Genuinely shocked me how bad it was. And I don't think anyone's really hit home about that performance enough. Everyone's just sort of gone off the sort of tangent of like, well, that's just how good Amanda Nunes is. Wow, how amazing was Amanda Nunes? Aldana couldn't do anything because Nunes is so good. And I'm just like, other than a couple of leg kicks that Aldana went for and a couple of punches around, she just stood there and accepted a loss. And it's crazy because she got given a title shot that she didn't deserve. She's number 5 in the division. Fair enough, Juliana Pena didn't deserve it either, but I'm sure Juliana Pena would have went for it. It makes me respect Juliana Pena. I was laughing at her striking in the rematch against Amanda Nunes when she was rushing forward after Nunes and getting dropped. But at least she was trying in hindsight, right? At least she went for that armbar in round 4 and showed that she had some grit and she really wanted to win. I mean, her win against Amanda Nunes is entirely based on who wanted it more in that fight. That was grit. She out-hustled Amanda Nunes and turned the tide on Amanda Nunes, eventually getting a finish in that first fight. Now, it wasn't a motivated Amanda Nunes that was entirely like locked in on her training camp, I understand, but there's a point to that. Aldana might have just had the worst title fight performance of all time. Like, I know there's Carla Esparza, Rose Namajunas, but I mean, there are so many examples when you think back at women's title fights. Valentina Shevchenko versus Carmouche. I mean, there's loads of women's MMA examples of title fights that are just like such bad performances from contenders and champions alike. But this one really stuck out because it was like, you've got this opportunity that so many people would kill for, and you've just fumbled it so badly. And we've seen other MMA fighters fumble title shots, get KO'd in the first round. Who cares, dude? You tried, you got KO'd. it really did hit home the fact that she did nothing in that fight to try and win. And it was shocking. But we move on because I want to talk about some other things. And I've spoken about this for about 8 minutes now. But it really did shock me seeing her just sort of put her hands up and do nothing to try and beat Amanda Nunes. It's like when she landed that early shot on Amanda Nunes. She was like, oh my God, I almost won. Better not do that again. And then just never went back to throwing punches with any type of conviction whatsoever. It was crazy. Like, if I didn't know any better and I was a casual fan, I'd be looking at that fight and going, seems kind of rigged. I'd genuinely be like that. I'd be like, what's going on? This one's not throwing anything. She's just standing there, losing non-stop, not doing anything to try and win. At the peak of women's MMA. Against the GOAT. This is the GOAT's competition. Not even doing anything. Crazy. We move on, though, to Amanda Nunes' retirement. I didn't give her enough praise. Respect to Amanda Nunes. She's the greatest women's fighter of all time. Straight up. She's the greatest women's fighter of all time. You look at Amanda Nunes' resume, and you can see her win over Irene Aldana, Juliana Pena, Megan Anderson, Felicia Spencer, Jermaine Durandamy, Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, I just burped, Raquel Pennington, Valentina Shevchenko twice, Ronda Rousey, Misha Tate, Sarah McMahon, Jermaine Durandamy again earlier in her career. She beat Julia Budd, who went on to become the Bellator champion. She beat Julia Budd at Strikeforce back in the day. Like, she has really solid wins. No women's MMA fighter is even going to come close to that resume. I know all of the Valentina Shevchenko simps and virgins are just out there saying, like, not my women's MMA go. You know what I mean? All those fucking, look at the profile pictures of a Valentina Shevchenko fan is all I'm going to tell you. Because Jesus Christ, it's actually an abomination. You see that these are like Valentina Shevchenko fans going, not my women's GOAT, on the posts that they're doing on the UFC about Amanda Nunes being the women's GOAT. Still claiming that Shevchenko got robbed twice. They were close fights. Fair enough, Shevchenko could have got the second one, but, you know, it was very close fights. And Shevchenko just lost to Grasso. We'll see when she gets her belt back about that women's GOAT type thing. But Amanda Nunes is gone. Had a great career. Made a ton of money. Went out on top. But what does this mean for the women's featherweight division? What does it mean for the women's bantamweight division? And for the women's featherweight division, I'll be real with you, I think it means goodbye. See you later. Thank you for being an absolute mistake of a creation. See you later. Goodbye. Thank you for being in the UFC, you worthless division. Now get out. Because we don't need the women's featherweight division. Now the problem with the women's featherweight division is that the UFC knows that PFL has a heavier weight class for women. Some other places have a heavier weight class for women. So the UFC doesn't want to be the one that doesn't have a weight class that another promotion has. You know what I mean? And they're really kind of focusing on that with PFL. Like, one reason they won't do a tournament format is because they don't want to be the person that's copying another promotion. So they're going to keep the women's featherweight division as long as another promotion keeps a heavier women's MMA division. So they're going to keep it, which is annoying because they still don't have rankings on their website for it. And I'm not noticing a surge of women's featherweight fighters. If they made a women's atomweight division, and then we saw a surge of, like, immediately a top 15 is signed, that would be amazing. So why not create an atomweight division at 105? You know what I mean? Even some strawweights are too small for strawweight. Immediately you'd have maybe Tisha Torres moving down to that division and some other women's flyweights that are a bit smaller. But they keep this women's featherweight division. I have no idea why. What's going to happen now? Nunes has left both of those divisions. So is Norma Jamont going to be fighting for a vacant belt at featherweight? Is that really the future of women's MMA? Is that really what we've got to strap in for? Like, look out, guys. I know it was like a bit weird that Nunes retired, but trust me, we're going to make it up to you guys. It's Norma Jamont versus Meishy Sasson 2 for the vacant featherweight title shot. It's going to be a big one. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in that whatsoever. And the winner of that will not be seen as a champion by me. And not by any of the MMA fans who have any self-respect or any respect for the sport whatsoever. You can't just crown a new champ at women's featherweight. It'll be an absolute joke. So what are they going to do with that division now Nunes is gone? She was the only reason it made sense, and it never made any sense anyway. So they've run out of sense to keep the women's featherweight division around. And for women's bantamweight, What's going to go on there? Who are we looking at as a prospect in that division to maybe cause some shake-up in the division and mix things up a little bit? We've had some women's flyweights saying that they're going to move up if they can fight for a vacant belt. Erin Blanchfield said she wouldn't mind moving up to bantamweight and fighting for the vacant belt. And I reckon what they're going to do is give Juliana Pena the title shot. They're gonna do that because she has a win over Nunes, and we're already seeing her make comments about Nunes being she's being delusional, Juliana Pena. She's making comments like Nunes is ducking her, so they're going to go with that narrative, and Juliana Pena is probably going to get a title shot. We've also got a few fights coming up in women's MMA that are in some big positions that are, I believe it's Holly Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva. If I'm not mistaken, there's a fight night card coming up soon, and it is in July the 15th. Holly Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva is a big matchup in the main event. Mayra Bueno Silva is ranked number 10. Holly Holm is ranked number 3. If Holm beats her, she's already beaten Pennington. I don't know why she's below Pennington in the rankings. I guess you should put her above at number 2 and then do Pena versus her. Raquel Pennington is also an option. I don't think you go with Raquel Pennington as a title fight right now in the women's bantamweight division just because of the fact that she lost so dominantly to Amanda Nunes, and she's not a big name anyway. She's getting up there in age, and she lost so dominantly to Nunes long ago. I know she's put together some wins. I don't know if she has a matchup coming up soon. I'm just going to check that right now. I don't think she does. I think she was supposed to be fighting against Irene Aldana, and that got scrapped. So I reckon what they're going to end up doing is Juliana Pena. They're going to hope Holly Holm wins against Mayra Bueno Silva, and then they're going to hope that Juliana Pena finishes Holly Holm, and then have Juliana Pena as the face of the women's bantamweight division. And I'll be real with you guys. Yes or no? I think Juliana Pena would sell some pay-per-views. It wouldn't be like, oh my God, another Juliana Pena fight. Like, she actually does do a good job of trying to sell her fights. Even though she's so delusional, she talks a lot of smack. She trashes other fighters. I'm sure she'd have a lot to say about Holly Holm, a lot to say about Raquel Pennington as well. I think those are great matchups to make. And I think that maybe over time, people would appreciate Juliana Pena more than they appreciated Amanda Nunes. And Nunes was put in some big fights against Rousey, Miesha Tate, Holly Holm. She was on a John Jones card, another one of the cards. She had her own pay-per-view cards. She had some good spotlight. I don't think Juliana Pena would be that bad as a champ. But outside of Juliana Pena, who really is there that wouldn't be terrible as a champion at women's bantamweight? That's what I want to end this video on. Who is there that wouldn't be absolutely terrible to have as a women's bantamweight world champion? Juliana Pena would maybe sell it a bit. That's why I mentioned her. Outside of her, do we want Mayra Bueno Silva to become champ? I mean, she does have some big tits. Who else is there in that division? There's only 20 fighters at women's bantamweight right now. I feel like they've lost talent. It's become less talent stacked over time, I feel like. Who else is there in that division that we can really talk about right now? There's no one. There's genuinely no one. We don't want to see Aldana get the belt. You know, you want to at least have someone who's 1-1 with Nunes on paper to get that title. So you're kind of just hoping that Juliana Pena gets it and stays champ for a bit, because who else is there? Unless Irina Alekseeva becomes an absolute savage and just starts tearing people up like a female Piotr Jan. You never know. Other than that, women's flyweights, maybe some of them should consider moving up, because women's flyweight has 42 fighters to the 20 at women's bantamweight. So it's very clear that women's flyweight is a much better division. Maybe we can get some of the older women's flyweights to take a little bit of a move up and add a bit of talent, add a tiny bit of name value to a higher division. But as of right now, women's MMA at bantamweight and featherweight is kind of done in the UFC. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Irene Aldana did nothing. Women's featherweight arguably should be absolutely removed, but I know they're not going to do it. And women's bantamweight is in a bit of a shambles. Hopefully Pena becomes champ, because she is delusional, and it makes headlines that she's delusional. Goodbye.